In the land of Moabites. The promised land is in view, but there are still battles to be fought. At Mount Horeb, in this rocky peak in an otherwise low region of the Sinai, we find a great leader whose breathing is getting shorter, who remembers where he's come from, who knows where he is, and knows where he hopes to go. At Horeb, he reminds us to remember that at this mountain a burning bush spoke to him. That great theophany where Yahweh spoke to him and enlisted his service to lead a people out of an impossible situation. Here at Horeb, he recalls the way in which the speaking God anointed the work of his hands, having transformed him from murderer to messenger. Here at Horeb, he remembers how it all came to be. How he was drawn out of the water and then raised up in a foreign land. It was here at Horeb, in the Sinai, that this great prophet of Israel shared the 10 Commandments with the people in desperate need of guidance and moral redirection. This was the place at this mountain, Mount Horeb, where Moses' tapping stick brought forth water from a rock. For this great leader of unparalleled significance in the ancient world, Moses, Mount Horeb was a familiar place. A place where God had shown up personally once before. But Horeb is the place we must leave. That place just before the place where God wants to get you. Horeb is a place to remember, but it's also a place to leave. And so we enter this text. It is beneficial that we see Horeb as a familiar place for Moses and for Israel. A place where God had a reputation of revealing God's self. And this time, the revelation is very personal, very inclusive. Lord, our God, spoke to us at Horeb. That alone reveals that God is not too far to speak to God's people. God is not some disinterested sovereign by whose hands we are judged without an opportunity to repent. The same God who led Israel out of Egypt. It is this God who has prepared a promised land for people who are prepared to move from the mountain. And so, Israel out of Egypt. It is this God who has prepared a promised land for people who are prepared to move from the mountain and carry on. And so God is very personal. When God is personal in this way, we get some sense of what prevenient grace is. Prevenient grace is forethought grace. Grace that precedes your awareness of it. It's the grace that we say, that was amazing. It's the grace that comes before us. The grace that's in front of you. The grace that you haven't caught up with yet. We are this close and have a long way to get in search of our promised land. And it's often when we're this close that the greatest fear cripples us. The God who speaks is the God who promises. And the God who promises is the God committed to keeping God's promise. And the God who promises and who is committed to keeping God's promise is the God you can put your trust in. It is this God who gets you off the mountain. It is this God who will get you through the hill country. There are other mountains ahead of you. And if you're not committed, you'll never see the promise. These people are at the mountain, and they were committed to staying in the wilderness. They said to Moses, it was better for us if we had stayed in Egypt. They were committed to staying. God was committed to giving them a better future. Making good on the promises that God made to Abraham. From the time they crossed over to the dry land to the time Joshua and Caleb brought back the minority report. This is a good land which flowed with milk and honey, and it could be possessed. The people had their heels in the ground. They were committed to stand where they were. And so I see a frustrated leader here. That's the portrait that I'm looking at in this text. A frustrated leader grown weary of leading a people who are not really ready to go. There are people who are not willing to make any sacrifice along the way. And those are the people that can never be relied on. But because they have developed such a wilderness mentality that any movement forward creates in them insecurity. And wherever they go in the wilderness or beyond the wilderness never leaves them. You keep reading in this chapter, you will discover that those who stop listening, they never entered the promised land. Those of the Joshua generation were permitted to enter the land. These are they who only knew of Moses by folklore, by oral tradition. They did not walk in the civil rights movement. They did not stand in the face of Bull Connor. They were not the ones sprayed with water hoses and all my dogs. They only knew Moses as legend. Young people, somebody journey through the wilderness with you. So that you might have